One Piece Blades of Fire Chapter 121-140. Chapter 121 Marco, Vista. Who are you? Major Burney looked at the half-squatting figure on the side of the warship, and spoke coldly. At the same time, the Marines all raised their long guns. The sound of the loading sounded quickly, and the black holes were aligned with this figure. This thing is useless to me, you should put it away. When the figure turned his head, his eyelids were half drooped, and his voice was a little lazy. You are. Major Burney thought he must have seen the man's face there, but he couldn't remember it for a moment. The moment Vasek Rear Admiral saw this man, his eyes shrank suddenly, and the corner of his mouth murmured. Major Burney finally remembered who this man was, and said with his eyes wide open, Whitebeard Pirates, captain of the first team, Phoenix Marco. I actually knew you. Marco laughed, and then jumped directly from the warship. Blue flames rose up in midair, turned into a pair of wings, and flew towards the place where the island was covered with sand and dust. At the same time, the sound came out. Vista, I'll go first. Vista. At this moment, Major Burney and Vasek of the Soul Body quickly walked to the edge of the ship, and looked down. After some searching, they finally saw a figure who was flying towards Marco. Going. This figure is wearing a top hat, blue pants, a big blue-purple cloak, and two western knives in both hands wearing white gloves. Captain of Team 5 of the Whitebeard Pirates, Foil Vista. One of the best swordsmen in the world. Major Burney narrowed his eyes and spoke in horror. Major Burney, is he really a leader of the Whitebeard Pirates? These Marine soldiers have basically never lived in the New World, so it is inevitable that they are not familiar with characters like the New World, but even so, they all know that the Whitebeard Pirates are the strongest pirates in the world. And his captain, standing on the top of the world, is called, the strongest man in the world, Whitebeard. I'm afraid it's not good. It must be that Major Zhang Yang tore the flag of the Whitebeard Pirates. That man came to save face. Major Burney looked solemn. Although he was also seeing the captain of the Whitebeard Pirates for the first time, he still heard about it. The leaders of the Whitebeard Pirates are all powerful, and the captain's at the front, not to mention comparable to Admiral, but at least it has quasi-Admiral-like strength. But now, the two captains who were ranked high, even the top two, came in person. Major Burney, who knew the seriousness of tenses, shouted to the soldiers next to him without any hesitation, connect me to the Marine headquarters. The Whitebeard Pirates, the second team leader, Phoenix Marco, and the fifth team leader, Foil Vista, are at war with Major Zhang Yang. The coordinates are New World XX, requesting support. Without saying much, Major Burney immediately ordered, all Marines get ready to go to the island to assist Major Zhang Yang and arrest the pirates. Marine's headquarters, after learning about Major Burney's news, did not hesitate to call the Marshal's office directly to report the situation. Did that old fellow Whitebeard want to do? He actually asked Marco and Vista to dispatch together. Kong's office, where Sengoku and Garp are both, was called by Kong after hearing the news. Zhang Yang tore up Whitebeard's flag, that old man can't hold his face, ha ha ha. Garp laughed while eating senbei. Are you going to kill Zhang Yang? Kong frowned and said. It's unlikely. It's probably not close to what Garp said. Whitebeard is just looking for face, cleaning up his publicity, and even if he wants to kill, Marco and Vista may not be enough. Sengoku, who has been dealing with Whitebeard for many years, is naturally very aware of Whitebeard's people. This time only the two of them came. Although they are strong, it is also a golden opportunity. Kong put his hands on his chest and said solemnly. Marshal, that man is much stronger than Golden Lion. Did you forget that Golden Lion almost destroyed half of Marineford alone? If Marco or Vista is captured this time, that man will at least not be angry and will try his best to save them, but once he kills both of them, then... Sengoku didn't say what to say next, but Garp took over and laughed. By then, Marineford will be ruined, and Marine will be humiliated. Ha 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 ha. Eating can't take your mouth. Sengoku knocked Garp hard on the forehead. Sooner or later, there will be a battle. After all, that man knows that one Pisces exists. Kong's voice fell, including Garp, all stopped, and the whole room fell silent for a moment. With the sound of sighing, Kong continued, "So, do you want to send troops to support Zhang Yang now?" "No, it's not like that kid Zhang Yang can't handle it. Besides, even if it's marine in the New World, what effect can it play on those two?" Garp said with a solemn expression. Over Fishman Island, somewhere in the New World. Being smashed to the ground, Zhang Yang fell into a big pit, coughed and walked out of the smoke, but he was not injured, but his clothes were torn and covered with a lot of dust. Blue Flame, who is? Just as Zhang Yang frowned and recalled, his expression suddenly changed. When Lu Ren Ruahuo appeared in his right hand, Zhang Yang's figure disappeared in place. At the same time, a blue flame descended from the sky, hitting the ground where Zhang Yang had stayed before like a flowing arrow. The ground cracked and dust flew. "It's dangerous." Zhang Yang looked at the unbroken ground in front of him, and couldn't help being a little scared, but also a little fortunate. If he didn't run away when he almost passed by, at this moment, it was not the ground that was smashed, but Zhang Yang himself. "Who is it?" As Zhang Yang murmured, a somewhat surprised voice came from the smoke. "I actually escaped." Chapter 122, Life and Death Crisis. "Who is?" As Zhang Yang frowned, a figure suddenly shot out of the smoke like a cannonball. He was startled. Zhang Yang raised the blade like fire, grabbed the hilt with one hand, and supported the blade with the other, blocking the punch. The powerful impact caused Zhang Yang's figure to keep retreating, leaving a shocking ravine on the ground. Phoenix or Ko. Looking at the blonde young man in front of him, Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, and his expression suddenly became solemn. If Ace, who has not yet boarded the ship, was excluded, Marco's strength was number 1 in the Whitebeard pirate team leader. Zhang Yang did not hesitate at all. With a flick of the flowing blade in his hand, he murmured, "All things are scattered, all will be reduced to ashes, and the flowing blade is like fire." As the flames suddenly wrapped around the flames, Zhang Yang's spiritual pressure jumped from the rank of vice captain to the rank of captain, and the powerful momentum burst out in an instant, setting off a gust of wind raging in this forest. Fought with Marco. What no one noticed was that in a dark forest not far from here, there was a black-robed figure with his back against a big tree, sitting cross-legged and wiping the long knife in his hand. A weapon that is no weaker than the supreme sword. But at the moment when Zhang Yang put the flowing blade Ruahuo Shikai in his hand, the figure let out a sigh, and when he looked up, his eyes seemed to see through the endless distance, and he saw the flowing blade Ruahuo slashing in Zhang Yang's hand wrapped in flames. On Marco. But he didn't stop for too long, he just retracted his gaze and continued to lower his head to wipe the long knife in his hand, but under the frame, there was a hint of greed in the slightly drooping eyes. As the clouds covered the sun, the black-robed figure merged into the darkness, and only the long knife in his hand was wiped, shining with a fierce light like the eyes of the god of death. After holding Shikai, Ruo Ren Ruahuo fought with Marco, but Zhang Yang did not have much of an upper hand. Currently, it is also due to the preservation of his strength, but it is more because of Marco's strong strength. If the all-round fighting technique is the foundation of Marco's strength, then the Phoenix Fruit ability, which is comparable to Logia's elementalization and amazing resilience, is the advanced point of Marco's strength. Zhang Yang had previously used a first-style slash, although a shocking crack was left on Marco's chest, but the next moment, the azure flames surged, as if there was no injury, which made Zhang Yang amazed for a long time. Pong! Zhang Yang armament covered his right leg and collided with Marco. The next moment Zhang Yang had cold sweat on his forehead. A fear hidden in his body burst out. Although it was vague, his keen perception really made Zhang Yang aware of it. To the looming crisis of life and death. If you are stunned again, your head will be gone. Taking advantage of the moment when Zhang Yang was stunned, Marco turned over and kicked his steel-colored right leg towards his head. The 39 round box fans of the Binding Way. Marco's lazy voice pulled Zhang Yang's consciousness back to reality. Looking at the leg that was about to hit his forehead, Zhang Yang was startled for a while, pointed his finger forward, and at the same time his figure kept popping backwards. Marco's foot slammed into a circular protective shield in an instant, but the next moment there was a cracking sound from the protective shield. Cracks like spider webs filled the air, shattered in an instant, and then turned into yellow lights and disappeared. Who the hell is around here? Is Marco trying to kill me? Behind. Zhang Yang's eyes shrank, frowned and looked around, but his expression was tense. When he smelled a scent of violets, Zhang Yang turned around abruptly, and saw the fierce sword energy that crossed, and at the same time, Marco's the figure turned into a spiral of blue flames and shot towards him. Torch. In a critical moment, the slightest bit of Zhang Yang was about to be attacked, but at this moment, as Zhang Yang's voice fell, a raging flame raged out on Ruo Ren Ruo Huo. Boom. As the flames contracted, an explosion suddenly occurred, and the powerful impact spread rapidly towards the surroundings with Zhang Yang as the center. In just an instant, the two crossed sword chi in front of Zhang Yang collapsed instantly. Pung. Because Marco was the closest to Zhang Yang, the entire power of the flame explosion almost hit Marco, but in an instant, Marco's whole body was covered with cyan flames, and it was faintly transformed into a big cyan bird, quite in the shape of a phoenix. After turning into a phoenix, Marco wrapped his body with his wings, and burst back between the huge impact and the raging flames, and at the same time, the surrounding trees were directly submerged by the sea of fire at this moment. As for the other figure, because it was not very close to Zhang Yang, when the two swords crossed in front of him, it blocked the raging impact and flames, but it also took a dozen steps back before stopping, and even his arms were some numbness. Damn, what flame is this? Leaning on a shaky tree, the green flames were surging quickly to repair the burn on his body. Marco wiped the blood that overflowed from the corner of his mouth, frowned and murmured, even if it is a Kainu's magma, the temperature is not the same. Not so high. In the sea of fire, the figure holding the double swords, after leaving a sunken crack on the ground, the figure quickly burst into the sky, commanding a high position, and slashing towards Zhang Yang with the momentum of breaking the army. Team 5 Captain Foil Vista. Zhang Yang's eyes shrank, looking at the figure coming from Vista. His mind was uncertain. Could it be that he wants to kill me? Ding, ding, ding. Before he could think about it, Zhang Yang and Vista fought together, and at the same time Marco on the other side also recovered. The green flames entangled, and when he turned into a blue fire phoenix, he spread his wings and flew towards Zhang Yang. Colonel Bernie, this way. A Marine noticed Zhang Yang during the battle and shouted loudly, but his voice was drowned out by the battle, but fortunately, Bernie had noticed it and brought Marine to the woods here. What are these weirdos? Major Zhang Yang is under the siege of the two of them, and he will not fall behind. Looking at the shocking sea of flames in front of them, exuding hot and high temperature, and the three people fighting together, the Marines couldn't help but speak in horror. Shoot. Chapter 123 Tired, take a good rest. Bang bang bang. The explosion of flames, the vibration of the air, and the collision of swords and swords seemed to be transformed into loud noises, echoing in an endless stream in this forest that was gradually submerged by the sea of fire. This kid's swordsmanship is impossible at this age. Whether it's kendo or fighting technique, they are all first class, and even have other special abilities. What devil fruit is eaten? It can't be Zone. Some are like Paramesha and some are like Logia, but they are not like. And in addition to a higher temperature flame than a Kainu magma, he also has Conqueror Haki. That knife is not unusual either. During the Vietnam War, Marco and Vista were more frightened. For this young Major Marine, Whitebeard asked them to work together to deal with it. This was already highly recognized by the public, but now it seems that it is still underestimated. After all, being able to fight so many rounds under the two of them, not to mention that the winner has not yet been decided, but has the upper hand, this kind of strength is not something that ordinary Marine can do. Even in the eyes of the two, even the quasi-admirals like Akainu, Kizaru and Kuzan would find it difficult to gain the upper hand under their joint efforts. One bone. Looking at Marco, who turned into a phoenix and flew above his head, and hit him with a punch, Zhang Yang's left fist was closed at his waist, and when he hit it quickly, it gave Marco a strange feeling of slowness. When the two fists were about to collide, Marco showed a touch of shock, and without any hesitation, he hurriedly retracted his fist, and when his right leg was raised, Qingyan rolled around, and slammed it into Zhang Yang's chest. The body flew out, and then stayed in midair. Vista, watch out for bullets. Zhang Yang's body was smashing into the sea of fire, and at this moment, Vista's figure appeared in front of him, and his two knives flashed. Come. Zhang Yang Lu Ruohuo stood in front of him, and at the same time he stretched out a finger and pointed to Vista's left side. Boom. The shock wave seemed to hit something in the sky, it exploded in an instant, and a puff of smoke rose, and when Vista's two knives slashed at Luyan Ruohuo Dao, Zhang Yang's falling body was hit by a strong pressure that turned into a black shadow. Ground. Major Zhang Yang. Bernie's voice came out, and when he was about to hit the ground, Zhang Yang's figure suddenly disappeared, glared at Bernie fiercely, and then appeared in front of Vista. Vista, you are too inattentive. If the shock wave released by this kid hadn't blocked the bullets shot at you at the end, I don't know what would have happened at this moment. Hearing Marco's words next to him, Vista was shocked, and Zhang Yang's apologetic voice also came from. I am really sorry, they fired a black shot. Black gun. Vista was stunned for a moment, then laughed. It's an interesting marine, as Dad said, but thank you very much. Boy, you are so strong. Isn't it very condescending to be a major marine? Is it interesting to come to us? Marco lowered his eyes slightly, looked lethargic, and said somewhat casually. Ah, you mean to let me be a pirate with the Whitebeard pirates? Zhang Yang was stunned, including the marines behind the jungle. Zhang Yang looked at Marco with some crying and laughing, and said, Marco, do you know what you are doing? You are blatantly instigating Major Marine to board the pirate ship. Why don't you save face for Marine? I can't help it. Dad asked me to ask you. Marco spread his hands, a little helpless. As Whitebeard. Zhang Yang's expression became a little dignified, but the next moment was Isho. I'm looking forward to seeing this antique, ha ha ha. I look forward to our next meeting. It's time to find something, and it's time to ask. Marco and Vista didn't stop there, they just went ahead. Major Zhang Yang, do you want to track these two pirates with a bounty of over 100 million, and report their whereabouts to the Marine headquarters? Bernie brought Marine to Zhang Yang, and said solemnly. You should report the situation to the Marine headquarters just now. If they want to arrest these two people, a large number of Marines have already come, so why wait until now? Zhang Yang didn't bother about Bernie's order to shoot. After all, as a Marine, it was normal for him to do so. After a pause, Zhang Yang yawned. After sitting up from the ground, he stretched. Let's go, I haven't had such a hearty duel for a long time, I'm tired. If you're tired, you should have a good rest. Just as Zhang Yang was about to leave, a vicissitudes of life came from behind him, and there was a faint sound of clogs stepping on the ground. Who? Marine Door suddenly turned around, nervously holding his spear at the dark forest behind him. Bernie frowned and shouted. When Vista appeared, Zhang Yang thought he was killing him, but as the battle continued, although he found that Vista was ruthless, he didn't mean to kill him, including Marco. Therefore, the intense fear that Zhang Yang had risen for a while, and the life and death crisis he perceived, finally gradually dissipated after the battle and the constant exploration of the surrounding spiritual pressure. Gollum. But when he heard the vicissitudes of life, Zhang Yang swallowed a mouthful of saliva, his face changed suddenly, there was a touch of fear in his pupils, and even at this moment he could hear the sound of his heart beating faster, even at this moment he didn't have the courage to turn around. Who is it? Or we'll shoot. Bernie looked at the figure moving forward in the dark, and swallowed nervously. I count 3. 3. 2. 1. Bernie's voice was slower and more nervous, but when he saw that the other party still didn't move, he took a deep breath and shouted, "Shoot!" Bang bang bang. The dark gun hole, with the rising of gunpowder smoke and the sound of the sound, the bullet shot towards the forest, towards the moving figure, but after that, there was no movement, as if falling into the darkness of death, it was difficult to escape. Chapter 124 Escape. If you're tired, take a good rest. This vicissitudes of life seems to have been echoing in Zhang Yang's mind as soon as it appeared. After a long time, a very strong life and death crisis, a fear of death shrouded Zhang Yang's mind, making him tremble inexplicably. When I got up, I heard question after question in my mind. Zhang Yang, what are you afraid of? You are a transmigrator, and you have inherited the mantle of the captain. Fire can also exert some of its power, and even a Kainu has already solved it. What are you afraid of? Is it really that scary? You don't even dare to take action. Don't you dare to turn around and take a look. At this moment, Zhang Yang was the only one who turned his back, and the others held their spears and pointed straight ahead. Gollum. When the bullets entered the dark forest and there was no movement, the suppressed and slightly frightening atmosphere around them and the mysterious and slowly approaching figure caused cold sweat to break out from the foreheads of every sailor present, and they couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. Stomping on. The sound of clogs was getting closer and closer, and everyone's mind was gradually tense. At a certain moment, when the sound of clogs fell and no longer sounded, everyone looked in front of them, walked out of the dark forest, and was illuminated by the fire in the sea of fire. Revealed figure. This is a figure wearing a black robe, but wearing a white Taoist uniform inside, holding a long sword with a sheath in his hand and stepping on clogs. At this moment, he raised his head, as if a breeze was blowing, covering his head with the black robe. The part blew down. His face was gloomy, his skin was wrinkled, and his round-framed glasses were framed on the high bridge of his nose. Who are you? Seeing the old man in front of him, Bernie roamed with coldness all over his body, his voice trembled, but he still shouted. Tread, tread. The old man moved again, but this time with the clogs falling. When they appeared again, the old man was only 10 meters away from Bernie and the others. When the second clogs sounded, the old man had already appeared behind them and pulled Vivi out. The long knife that came out retracted its scabbard. How? Bernie and the others all looked weird, ready to look back, but the moment they turned around, their expressions were full of incredible. After the words fell, not even the screams were made. There was a shocking slash on their chests. When they spurted a mouthful of blood, they suddenly fell to the ground and lost their vitality. The sound of falling to the ground sounded almost at the same time. For some unknown reason, when this voice reached Zhang Yang's mind in fear, the old man's few numbers like nightmare disappeared in an instant, and when there was a roar from the world of Zhang Yang, it suddenly fell apart. Gorosei, 5 elders. He was shocked. When Zhang Yang was awake, he turned around suddenly and saw the Marines lying in a pool of blood, as well as the old man with a long knife who was also looking at him. When he saw his face, Zhang Yang's eyes suddenly shrank, the look is difficult to see the extreme. I just saw your trembling and terrified look. Why? In a blink of an eye, you have the courage to turn around and speak. When looking at Zhang Yang, Gorosei, 5 elders' eyes flashed with sarcasm, and said with a mocking tone. There are all kinds of things, all turned into ashes, and the blades are like fire. Zhang Yang didn't answer him. The blade like fire suddenly appeared in his hand, and when he gripped the handle of the knife, a hot flame suddenly rose up. Zhang Yang stared at Gorosei, 5 elders and said, What are you doing? It really is a good knife. Gorosei, 5 elders stared at the flowing blade in Zhang Yang's hands, and there was a hint of exclamation in his eyes. After muttering in a low voice, he revealed a cold smile. You have already taken out the knife, what do you mean? Pung. Zhang Yang's figure suddenly shot backwards, and at the same time, he stretched out his hand and pointed forward, the 79 boundaries of the Tao. Gorosei, 5 elders was about to take a step forward with his clogs, but the next moment, his eyes wrinkled, and 9 dark Reiatsu appeared in the void. The action of Gorosei, 5 elders caused his clogs to stop in midair. Songming. Taking advantage of the Gorosei, 5 elders being unable to move, Zhang Yang did not hesitate in the slightest. Lu Jian Ruohuo suddenly swung forward, and the sea of fire raged, turning into a giant tornado and directly drowning the body of Gorosei, 5 elders. The 2 moves fell. Zhang Yang did not hesitate, he opened one after another in an instant and fled to the outside. Although Zhang Yang doesn't know how terrifying the strength of this Gorosei, 5 elders is, he doesn't want to gamble with his life. He doesn't want the scene in the crystal ball to become a reality, so at this moment he has no choice but to escape. Since the old man wants to kill you, do you think you can escape? Seeing the figure of Zhang Yang running away, the old man was gloomy-isho. When his arms were raised, the black spiritual pressure used for restraint suddenly shattered. At the same time, he pulled out his long sword very quickly, and even afterimages appeared, and then he slashed forward. With this slash, the sky roared, and a blood thunder flashed away. At the same time, the flame tornado cracked a gap and exploded unexpectedly, but the figure of the old man had already disappeared. Golem. Hearing the explosion, Zhang Yang disappeared from one place and reappeared in another place. Feeling this powerful impact, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Under Songming and Ghost Dao, even Gorosei, 5 elders should have injury. This can also delay his speed. You can probably escape by relying on the instant body. This time Gorosei, 5 elders dressed up like this and dispatched in person, and there is no news from Marine. I am afraid that Gorosei, 5 elders are secretly manipulating behind the scenes. But where should we go now? If the Gorosei, 5 elders miss this time, they will definitely not let it go. Then the Marine branch and even the Marine headquarters will not be able to go back. Either inquire about the situation and go to Whitebeard first. After thinking about it, Zhang Yang still felt that it was safer to go to Whitebeard. After all, Whitebeard had already made a solicitation for him, and Whitebeard had a broad mind, and the most important thing was his strength. Even the Gorosei, 5 elders had to take care of it. But just as he decided where to go, when he was about to come to the island, and the warship not far away had already appeared in his sight, Zhang Yang felt that the surrounding temperature had cooled down in an instant. Choosing your burial place. Chapter 125 Zhang Yang's death. Choosing your burial place. When the temperature of Zhang Yang's body dropped suddenly, as if he was trapped in an ice cave, a gloomy voice sounded suddenly, and when it entered Zhang Yang's mind, it was like a roar. Zhang Yang turned around suddenly, and saw the man standing in front of him at a glance. Gorosei, 5 elders. Instantly. With his eyes shrunk, Zhang Yang's figure disappeared in a flash, and when he appeared on the other side, the figure of Gorosei, 5 elders also appeared in front of Zhang Yang, and his lips moved slightly. Are you still running? Damn it, how the hell did he catch up? Zhang Yang scolded secretly, but he still did not fight with Gorosei, 5 elders, and flew directly towards the sky. But when he first reached the height of the island, the figure of Gorosei, 5 elders had already appeared above Zhang Yang's head, with a scabbard. Gently towards Zhang Yang's shoulder a little. Although the movement was extremely slow, this light touch made Zhang Yang feel that 1,000 jins of force was pressing down on him, and the figure just slammed into the island in an instant. He smashed a big pit on the ground, and in the dust mist flying, Zhang Yang struggled to stand up, spit out a mouthful of blood with visceral minced meat, clenched his teeth, and glanced at his left arm with complicated eyes. At this moment, the left arm that hangs weakly is covered with blood. Not only that, but all the bones in the left arm have collapsed and shattered, which is obviously caused by the scabbard. Zhang Yang really did not expect the strength ratio of Gorosei, 5 elders. Stronger than he imagined. Tread. The sound of clogs sounded, bringing Zhang Yang's thoughts back to reality. When a knife light shone on Zhang Yang's handsome cheeks, a sneer of fear of death erupted, and the flowing blade in Zhang Yang's hand slipped from his right hand, stuck on the ground, and the flame disappeared. Watching the knife rise and fall, and finally return to the scabbard, Zhang Yang's eyes suddenly widened, and he even wanted to say something, but even if he grew his mouth, he couldn't make any sound. so he could only watch his body from the middle as divided into two. Pumbaa. When the blood spewed out, the two halves of the corpses smashed into the big pit, and when the dust was lifted, death filled the air. Huh. Gorosei, 5 elders let out a small snort. He was about to reach out to touch the flowing blade Ruohuo, which was inserted at Zhang Yang's feet, but when his finger just touched Dongfang Shoji's hilt, the knife turned into a little red light. His fingertips slipped and disappeared. What a weird knife. Gorosei, 5 elders frowned and didn't speak anymore. They put Zhang Yang's 2 corpses back in the black cloth bag they carried with them, and then walked towards their boat, but when they just walked to the warship, their footsteps stopped. Looking towards the edge of the empty deck. It turned out to be a soul body. Hearing this sentence, Vox, who was looking at Zhang Yang's corpse divided into 2 on the edge of the warship deck, suddenly panicked, and subconsciously wanted to run away, but a shocking blood-colored sword energy suddenly passed through Vox's body at this moment. In Vox's dull look, his body suddenly dissipated, and at the same time an open leather notebook fell to the ground. Tread. The sound of clogs suddenly sounded on the deck. Gorosei, 5 elders bent down and picked up the cowhide notebook, glanced casually, and his pupils suddenly became serious. After flipping through a few more pages, Gorosei, 5 elders' pupils shrank more and more. When they looked at the black bag containing Zhang Yang's corpse, a strange light appeared in their eyes, and he muttered, "It's not the fruit ability. I really regret it, otherwise I would have learned more interesting things, such as that knife. That scientific madman should be in a hurry." Just after Zhang Yang and Marine on his warship disappeared for 2 days and there was no news, the Marine headquarters finally became anxious and ordered Marine from New World to search with all their strength. Finally, within a few hours after the incident, Marine was found on a deserted island. Warship. On the island, many violent fights and large-scale burn marks were found. According to the judgment of Marine experts, Major Zhang Yang had fought with the 2 of them here. According to the Marine corpse left on the island, it looked almost exactly the same. When they cut the marks, they all concluded that a great swordsman must have participated in the battle. Marine searched the island for 3 whole days, but still couldn't find any trace of Zhang Yang. Even Marine's headquarters ordered him to search in the sea for 3 days. On this day, Marineford, in the office of the Marshal of Marine Headquarters. "Damn it, it's been 6 days, where did that kid Zhang Yang go?" Garp changed his past. Instead of eating senbei, he shouted with a grumpy expression. Marco and Vista are both top players, and Vista is fully capable of leaving those slash marks at the same time, maybe Zhang Yang. Sengoku looked solemn, Vivi shook his head, and the meaning was clear. "That kid can even solve it with a kainu. No, I'm going to the New World myself and ask Whitebeard to find out in person." Garp finished speaking. He even disregarded the dissuasion of Kong and others, broke through the door and walked towards the port. "What do you think, Zephyr?" Kong's face was solemn, but Zhang Yang was the candidate he was going to train to become an admiral or even a marshal. If he died inexplicably now, the loss to Marine would be too great. They couldn't lose an Akainu and a Zhang Yang. The chance of surviving is very small, so continue to conceal this matter, and don't publicize it to the outside world. Because of the Fishman Island incident and his strong strength, Zhang Yang's prestige in Marine is not low. Zephyr continued with a solemn expression. Because of the Akainu incident, the strength of our Marine headquarters has been significantly weakened. Even if there is news of Zhang Yang's disappearance, I am afraid not only will Marine's people be unstable, but the pirates will also be eager to move, not to mention Revolutionary Army. But how long can you hide it? Kong Vivi shook his head. He hoped that Zhang Yang was just injured and healed somewhere. I can hide it for as long as I can. The search operation must continue. Sengoku sighed and looked a little tired. Because Garp was hot-tempered and Zephyr had to manage the Marine Academy, Sengoku had been in charge of the search activities, and now he has not slept for 6 days and nights. If Zhang Yang is really killed, Marine's highest combat power is really going to be weakened in an unprecedented way. Shouldn't it be time to consider recruiting soldiers from the world? Chapter 126 Grumpy Garp. Dad, as you said, it's a different marine. After that battle, Marco and Vista went to the Sabayati Islands and Fishman Island to investigate Zhongyang a little, and returned to the Whitebeard pirates 7 days later. Whitebeard was watching Marco's publicity materials at the moment, and laughed after reading it. It's really a kid who takes advantage of my appetite. The strength is very strong. Both me and Vista will not be able to gain the upper hand, and it seems that he should still keep his hands. Marco recalled the battle that day with a solemn expression. Kong should be preparing to train him to be an admiral, or even a marshal, and what this brat is doing now tends to be true justice. I don't know if he really becomes a marine marshal and comes into contact with that blank 100 years, what will he do? What to do? Whitebeard was talking, and a pirate ran over with a panicked look. Daddy, Daddy. Marine warship. Marine is unlikely to interact with us. How many? Marco asked solemnly. One. Dad, maybe it's that kid Zhongyang. When I left, I said I wanted to come over and see you. I just came back from the front foot, and I didn't expect him to come. It's not a coincidence. Marco was stunned for a moment, and said to Whitebeard as if he remembered something. Captain Marco, no. Confused, the pirate continued, it's Garp the Fist. Garp. Marco was taken aback and looked at Whitebeard. Zhongyang was brought into Marine headquarters by Garp. Maybe he came here for this event. That old man, haven't seen each other for more than 10 years. Even if I let you go with Marco Vista, it's not a good thing. I'm not going to stand up for that kid Zhongyang this time, Gu la la la. Whitebeard laughed and said to Marco, go and see Marco, just in case the old man does something wrong. Vice Admiral Garp. Why did he come here? What's the matter? Just when Garp jumped from the warship and landed on the Whitebeard, the surrounding pirates were all panicked. Garp walked forward step by step with a gloomy expression on his face. On the ground. It's just fainting. Stay away from weak ones, or you won't be able to stop this old man's conqueror hockey. Captain Marco. And Captain Vista, Captain Jozu, and the rest of the captains. Marco finished speaking to the surrounding pirates. He saw that Garp was about to speak, but the next moment his expression changed. When Garp saw him, his expression was irritable, and he appeared in front of Marco when he moved. Marco's figure flew towards the inside of the ship like a broken kite. At the same time, Garp's figure flashed, and he came to Vista again. He also punched out. Vista's face changed. Even if he pulled out his two knives and crossed it in time, under the strong impact, he directly penetrated the deck and smashed downwards. Go. What? To kill two captains with one punch. Listening to Marco's words, the pirates all stepped aside, but at this moment, seeing that Garp's shot was so devastating, they all spoke in horror. Garp Vice Admiral, are you looking for something today? Jozu's face was ugly, and when his right fist smashed towards Garp, it was covered with tough diamonds. This is Captain Jozu's diamond fruit, the diamond-like defense is strong. The pirates on the side had not finished speaking, and the next moment Shahran stopped, staring at the front of the eyes dumbfounded. The right fist covered by Garp armament slammed into Jozu's diamond fist, and in an instant, a powerful impact burst out from the front of the two fists, causing the surrounding pirates to fly to one side. This is not the point is that with this punch, Jozu's figure actually retreated nearly 10 steps. What kind of strange power is this? This is the diamond-shaped Captain Jozu. In a short period of time, the three captains were repelled. Just as the pirates who flew out spoke in horror, Whitebeard's roar suddenly sounded. Garp, are you here to make trouble on my ship today? The sound came out, and Whitebeard burst out from the inside. The tall body contained an explosive force. The right fist seemed to be wrapped with a layer of air, and it collided with Garp's steel-colored fist in an instant. Boom! A monstrous sound came out, the void shook, the sky was covered with dark clouds, and there seemed to be thunderous tyranny. The surrounding seawater seemed to have received some huge stimulation, and it became manic, and the huge waves continued to beat on the sea one after another. A powerful impact and an extremely suppressed momentum broke out at this moment, spreading rapidly from the center of Whitebeard and Garp. The weak pirates immediately lost consciousness and flew out. Even the diamond-shaped Jozu and other captain-level characters all retreated backwards while their figures trembled at this moment. Not only that, the Sea King-like creatures in the surrounding sea area lost consciousness instantly under the ripples of this powerful momentum. It wasn't until the next moment that Garp and Whitebeard separated their fists and their figures stopped on both sides. The momentum and powerful impact of Conqueror Haki's collision did not disappear. At the same time, the dark clouds also dissipated, and the sky returned to the wind again. Harry Lee, even the sea calmed down. Gollum. So the pirates who were paying attention to this battle saw the two people in the confrontation and couldn't help swallowing, only to find that their backs were wet with cold sweat. It's actually on par with my father. Is this the strength of Marine's strongest combat power? What the hell is this power? After a moment of silence, the audience burst into an uproar in horror, and the captains such as Marco, Vista, and Jozu all watched this scene with solemn expressions, and they all felt Garp's terrifying strength. Whitebeard, where is Zhang Yang? The investigation still has to continue. Sengoku sighed and looked a little tired. Because Garp was hot-tempered and Zephyr had to manage the Marine Academy, Sengoku had been in charge of the search activities, and now he has not slept for 6 days and nights. If Zhang Yang is really killed, Marine's highest combat power is really going to be weakened in an unprecedented way. Shouldn't it be time to consider recruiting soldiers from the world? Chapter 127, The Old Man. Garp looked irritable, stared at Whitebeard like a wolf, and continued to fight if he disagreed. Zhang Yang. Whitebeard was stunned for a moment, but when he saw Garp's expression, his face became solemn. You mean Zhang Yang is missing? There are 3 possibilities for disappearance. One is being severely injured and looking for a place to heal, the other is being taken away in a coma, and the last is being treated with the body. Although there are deviations, it is similar. When Marco heard the news of Zhang Yang's disappearance, he was no longer in that lazy look. He frowned and looked at Garp and said solemnly, "It's true that Vista and I joined forces to fight against Zhang Yang, but even so, the whole fight for Zhang Yang is still dominated by the upper hand and hardly any major injuries." Quote. What about Marine's corpse, the uniform swordsmanship? I'm afraid Vista can't do it. Garp looked at Marco's serious look. His expression became more and more solemn. He pondered for a while, and took out a few photos and handed them to Vista. What Marine's body? I've been with Vista and he hasn't killed Marine. When we fought with Zhang Yang, we were surrounded by Marine, but we didn't fight them. Instead, Zhang Yang saved my life and blocked the bullet. Vista and Marco were both stunned and confused. Vista took the photo in Garp's hand, and when he casually glanced at it, his face suddenly became solemn. There are very few people in the world who can do this kind of knife mark, and every time one is a first-class great swordsman. Pluto Rayleigh is one, the redhead is one, I am one, and there is one. Who? Garp's irritable mood eased a little, but he realized that things shouldn't be so simple, and his expression became more and more solemn. Hawkeye Mahawk. Vista said it, a strong fighting intent flashed in his eyes. Is that the rumored world #1 great swordsman? Garp was stunned for a moment. Obviously he had heard of this person, and then said, that person has been hanging out with the redhead recently, often fighting swordsmanship, but the redhead is in East Blue recently, and the Hawkeye has not made any movement. As for Rayleigh, it's possible. Marine's body was found in the forest, where the fighting area is the largest, and there is no trace of fighting in the distance to the edge of the island, and there is a large pit at the mouth of the island, which was obviously formed by falling from the sky, and there is still a lot of blood in the pit, and at the same time there is a trace of a sharp weapon hanging down on the ground. And apart from this place, there are no other bloody footprints. Marco held a new photo of Garp in his hand, watched it carefully, and handed it to Vista. We didn't have this big hole when we came, and if there was, we couldn't forget it. Marine's body is a long way from this big pit. If someone sneaked into the island after we left, or someone was hiding on the island, but no matter what, someone must have killed Marine after we left. And chased Zhang Yang all the way here. Marco looked solemn and pointed to the big pit in the photo that had dried up and left bloodstains. Does anyone want to secretly plan to provoke a conflict between our Whitebeard pirates and Marine? Whitebeard had been silent for a while, and when he heard this, he finally smelled a hint of conspiracy, and his face was ugly. Not just with Marine, but Fishman Island. After some conversation, Garp had already weighed it in his mind, and realized that this matter was not the fault of Whitebeard. Garp's face gradually became gloomy, and he continued, the most important point is, who is this person? By the way, I remembered something. As if remembering something, Marco suddenly said, just when Vista was coming, I was fighting with Zhang Yang, but at a certain moment, he was stunned, and the fear and panic in his eyes were exposed. And that move afterwards, when he stepped back, he looked around, as if looking for someone. Hearing this, Garp frowned and muttered to himself, a person who can make Zhang Yang panic, and is also a very strong swordsman. Damn it. Garp's mood, which had calmed down, became violent again. After scolding, he turned and left without looking back, and jumped on the marine warship. What's wrong with him? Jozu was stunned for a moment, not understanding why Garp became irritable again. I'm afraid we're going to take the blame for others this time. Whitebeard's expression suddenly turned gloomy as Garp left, a group of old men who were immortal. Dad, do you know who is behind the scenes? On the other hand, after Garp left from Whitebeard, he did not go back to Marine headquarters, but drove the warship directly to the Holy Land Maria Jo. He arrived at the port without obstruction. After jumping directly from the warship, Garp became aggressive, as if there was an anger that had been suppressed in his heart, and the world government officials in suits saw Garp's figure and rushed over. Garp Vice Admiral, what are you doing today? What about the Gorosei 5 elders? Garp looked gloomy and strode forward quickly. Gorosei 5 elders are having a meeting, no one is allowed to enter, or I'll go and inform you first. Seeing that Garp was still ignoring him, and realizing that Garp's expression was wrong, the world government official took out the phone bug and whispered to the other side. After entering the most central castle, Garp went straight to the road leading to the council hall, where 2 rows of figures wearing world government guards appeared in front of him. Garp Vice Admiral, please wait outside. Go away for the old man. Garp slammed a punch towards the guard's chest, and the powerful impact directly sent his figure flying backwards. At the same time, the other guards rushed towards Garp. Garp took a step forward, his eyes widened, and a very suppressed aura spread directly. In an instant, although these guards were crushed to the ground, their figures moved. Must not. Garp came to the door of the hall, just punched, and after the door was directly cracked, the figure rushed inside. You bastard. Chapter 128. The news of Zhang Yang's death spreads. Dr. Peng Jabek, have you designed the artificial man's plan? The bearded Gorosei 5 elders looked at the gray-haired figure in a white coat with round eyes. It's no problem, and the test adjustment can be carried out in half a month at most. Peng Jabek took a sip of the coffee on the table, and his eyes were full of confidence. This corpse is full of treasures. After transformation, I can maximize his strength. Doctor, how's your research on that notebook? The Gorosei 5 elders, who were wiping their longswords, asked casually. This thing has broken through my understanding of the world. I'm already working on the research on the structure and replacement of Reiatsu, and it will take some time. Peng Jabek glanced at the leather notebook in the white coat, and the light in his eyes was exposed. This opportunity is actually a good one. It just happened that Whitebeard intervened. We can take advantage of the situation and put this crime on his head. Before a blonde Gorosei 5 elders in a black suit could speak, the door opened directly, and at the same time, a figure shot towards the Gorosei, 5 elders in Taoist uniforms like a cannonball. The Gorosei, when the 5 elders raised their heads, their hands clenched the hilt of the knife, colliding with the incoming iron fist. "Old man, you did what happened this time." Garp was furious, and when his steel-colored fist collided with his long sword, a powerful wave of air spread out around him. But just when this wave of air was about to hit Peng Jabek, there was no panic in his expression. He was still leaning on the chair, drinking coffee slowly, in front of Baker. "Garp, Vice Admiral, don't make such a fuss." When the blonde Gorosei, 5 elders raised their palms forward, they blocked these powerful air waves, and then said to Peng Jabek behind him, "Dr. Peng Jabek, it's too dangerous here, you'd better go to the research room to see the android first. Plan it. The Garp Vice Admiral, compared to a ticking time bomb, is still much safer." Vegapunk said something, put his hands in the pockets of his white coat, and walked slowly towards the door with the coffee in his hand. "Garp Vice Admiral, please calm down." A figure of Gorosei, 5 elders with curly white hair appeared between Garp and another Gorosei, 5 elders Vice Admiral, blocking Garp's punch with a palm. "Gorosei, 5 elders, don't think that I don't know what you are doing. The only person who has the strength to crush and is one of the best swordsmen in the world can only be you." Garp retracted his fist and said coldly, "You killed Zhang Yang. He stabbed us in such a big basket. If we leave it alone, it will explode sooner or later, and the time bomb should be removed as soon as possible." The bearded Gorosei, 5 elders said with his hands behind his back, "He's dead now, but he's dead more than alive." "What do you mean?" Garp sat cross-legged directly on the ground. "You might think that Zhang Yang really ate the so-called Paramesha fantasy fruit." The white curly-haired Gorosei, 5 elders lowered his eyes slightly, his eyes were very sharp, and continued, "Zhang Yang has a soul body on the warship, and his identity has been confirmed. The Vasiku was really killed by a Kainu that day." "Soul body, Vas." Garp was stunned and frowned, only to hear the Gorosei, 5 elders continue, "After killing this spirit body, we found a cowhide notebook. The content recorded above is unimaginable for us. Except for the knife that can release terrifying flames, which is still unexplainable for the time being, all his other moves are recorded in this notebook." After listening to what Gorosei, 5 elders said, Garp pondered for a while and said, "Where's Zhang Yang's body? Let me take it back." "I'm sorry, Zhang Yang's body is still useful to us. Father, the big thing is bad." As the great Prince Shaoxing rushed into the Dragon Palace Hall and came to Neptune, he looked anxious. "Zhang Yang is dead." "What? How is this possible?" 3 days later, a piece of news caused a sensation all over the world, and the core of the shock was Fishman Island. There are 2 photos in this newspaper. One is the picture of Zhang Yang fighting with Marco and Vista, and the second is Zhang Yang's corpse divided into 2. According to the recent investigation by the Marine Headquarters and the world government, the evidence is conclusive. Marine is a super genius, Marine hopes for the future, and Marine Major Zhang Yang, the messenger of peace, died in the battle with the Whitebeard pirates. The murderer was Marco, the captain of the Whitebeard pirates. Team 5 Captain Vista, quote, "The origin of this battle was on a deserted island in the forefront of the New World. Because Major Zhang Yang shredded the Whitebeard pirate flag on Fishman Island, revived marine justice, and made Whitebeard hold grudges in his heart, he sent two men on board. The top combat power teamed up to kill Major Zhang Yang. However, the corpse was found by the world government in time. In order to pass on the justice implemented by Major Zhang Yang, the world government specially invited Dr. Peng Jabek, the world's first scientist, to create an artificial man from the body of Major Zhang Yang, so that Major Zhang Yang can be justice again. And fighting. Not only that, in order to commemorate what Major Zhang Yang has done, he was specially awarded the title of Honorary Marine, which has been passed down for centuries. In addition, because of the unfortunate death of Major Zhang Yang, the matter of the world government's consideration of forming an alliance with Fishman Island has been put on hold for the time being. The same content was broadcast on broadcasts all over the world. As the horn sounded, the news of Zhang Yang's murder continued to spread, and for a while, the rejection of the Whitebeard pirates became more and more serious. How is it possible? How could brother Zhang Yang die? Dad wouldn't do this. Jinbei stood before King Neptune, shocked when he heard the news. Father, what should I do now? Whitebeard's protection is not there. Although the world government has stranded the alliance agreement with Fishman, it has clearly given up on this plan. It's just because of public opinion. Nipton understood what Shark said. He understood what it would be like if there was no one to protect Fishman Island, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and Neptune's face was solemn. Jinbei, take some of the prisoners who can be appointed in the prison. Come out and join the army. Starting today, Fishman Island is on alert level 1. Chapter 129 is me. Dad, it's not good. In the new world, the flustered voice of Thatch, captain of the 4th team of the Whitebeard pirates, suddenly echoed throughout the ship. Whitebeard read the newspaper that Thatch had given him. Marco caught the newspaper he threw out. After reading the contents of the newspaper, his expression became more and more difficult to look at. Dad, shall we do it? It's too deceiving. You dare to let our Whitebeard pirates take the blame. Also said the evidence is conclusive. Where is the evidence? Is it just based on the hand-to-hand picture? When the pirates on the deck knew about this, they were extremely dissatisfied, and the noises continued one after another. You really underestimate me. Whitebeard's face was gloomy. Although he guessed that this black cauldron was going to be his own back, it was really uncomfortable to be used by those old Gorosei, 5 elders. Dad, at this juncture, would it be too rash if you rush out? Marco's face was calm. Whitebeard took a sip of wine, and when he raised the big knife he was leaning against and slammed it down, the figure stood up directly, going or not going as a result. I am Whitebeard. How can I make them think I'm an outdated pirate now? Although it's not going to be a big fight, it's always better to let them have a long memory. Whitebeard looked at the shark fishman beside him and said solemnly, Then Muir, you should go back to Fishman Island first. We can't explain the publicity for a while. If we go to shelter them at this time, it will cause public anger. What are they going to say? You go with them first, and after this incident is over, I will arrange for the safety of Fishman Island. After the 8th Division Captain Namur nodded, he said to Whitebeard, Thank you, Dad, then I'll leave now. As Namur slammed into the water with a thud, the figure kept swimming toward him. Earlier, the news had already reached the Marine headquarters, and only 5 people who really knew the cause of Zhang Yang's death, Marshal Kong, Admiral Zephyr and Sengoku, Chief of Staff Crane and Vice Admiral Garp, but even if they knew the inside story, they concealed it. Down. In order to mourn Zhang Yang's sacrifice, Marine headquarters even gathered all Marine's strength to hold a memorial service for Zhang Yang. In fact, because of Zhang Yang's death, people in Marine are already panicking. After all, Zhang Yang's strength and prestige have been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people, so Kong and others discussed holding a memorial service to make Marine all excited, and turn the anger and hatred against the pirates into stronger motivation. In fact, this is indeed the case. Everyone's training and work are becoming more and more serious, but even so, the few people who know the truth are not happy and sigh all day long. And Garp even proposed to quit Marine, but was blocked by Sengoku and others, and finally Kong approved. Let Garp go home to rest for a while and take his grandson. Marine Academy. It's late at night, but Gecko is very faint, and the sky is faintly covered with dark clouds. A slender figure, wearing a school uniform, was running fast on the playground. His breathing became heavier and heavier, the tears from the corners of his eyes scattered in the air with the running, and then he squatted on the track, hugging his knees and crying. Alas! When a sigh sounded, a figure walked up to the woman with a sad expression on her face. Looking at the figure crying softly, Vivi shook her head and said, Tina, you have been practicing from morning to night for 3 whole days. There is no rest in the sky. Something will happen if this goes on. Woo woo woo. The deep weeping continued, a bit desolate and sad in this dark night. I'm also very sad about Zhang Yang's accident. but it's already like this. If you have an accident, let me explain to Zhang Yang. Bastille held back the tears that were about to fall. Okay, let's not talk about this for the time being. Just say that if you have an accident, no matter how strong you are, do you still have the life to avenge Zhang Yang? Ah, you say. Bastille suddenly roared at Tina, but tears also flowed down his resolute face at this moment. The deep cry, at this moment, seemed to burst out suddenly, and the sadness in my heart seemed to be vented along with the burst of the cry. On the other side, in the room on the 5th floor of Marine Academy, there is a cylindrical stone in front of Ai Yin. At this moment, she is wielding 2 swords, and she is slashing at the stone with each move like flowing water, bursting out with fire. Until a certain moment, her figure jumped up, and when the 2 knives slashed from top to bottom, 2 cyan sword chi suddenly spread out, and when they hit the stone exploded suddenly, and the debris smashed all around. Time. Some of them hit various parts of her body, but Ain didn't realize it, and moved another stone and continued to practice. Vince, who had a better relationship with Ain, stood outside the door, watched the scenes through the window, and sighed, it's 3 days like Tina. Apart from Ain and Tina, the Marine Academy, especially the academy on the 5th floor, worked harder than before, and their strength increased so quickly that even Zephyr was surprised, but he couldn't be happy. Instead, he sat alone on the roof of Marine Academy, his expression was gloomy, and his eyes were full of complexity. Justice. What exactly is justice? The Sabayati Bottom Islands is Zhang Yang's first stop, and it is also the first place where Zhang Yang has the highest prestige after Fishman Island. Because Zhang Yang used a strong hand to rectify the lawless areas before, which has benefited most residents. Immediately swept the entire island. Countless people spontaneously gathered in the square, begging Marine to attack the Whitebeard pirates and avenge Major Zhang Yang. Even if the situation intensified, Marine headquarters sent Sengoku over, which suppressed this matter. In a bar on a big hill in Sabayati Archipelago 13GR, Shaki and Rayleigh sat opposite each other, and Rayleigh took a sip of wine and sighed, "Hey, what a pity for a little seedling. On the wrong boat." Dong dong. Just as Shaki and Rayleigh were chatting, there was a weak knock on the door. Shaki frowned. She remembered to hang a closed sign on the door, "Closed today." Yes, Chapter 130 Attack on Fishman Island. Since you say that, let's break through our line of defense if you have the ability. Jinbei finished speaking, Sengoku gave him a deep look and waved, "Attack Fishman Island." As soon as the words fell, Marine and Fishman's army directly fought together. As the swords collided, the gunfire was endless, and the smoke filled the sky above, like a dark cloud. "Kizaru Vice Admiral, let me experience your strength." That Nier was still the same. Under his gloomy expression, his feet exerted a burst of force, and when the ground sank, his figure swooped towards Kizaru like a shark. Oops. If one is not careful, Whitebeard will come to trouble, it's a headache. Kizaru said lazily, but when Nier's figure was about to appear in front of him, he kicked out with one leg, and while the light flickered, an arc-shaped wave of light smashed directly at Nier. Speed is power, the speed of light kicks. The light wave approached in an instant, and when Nier's palm came out, a water ball directly converged, and when it collided with the arc-shaped light wave, it directly changed into a smooth mirror surface, which bounced the light wave into the sky. Afterwards, Kizaru and Namur fought with their bare hands, but Namur was clearly at a disadvantage from the start. Jinbei found Sengoku, and the first shot was a fierce move. The two fought with only Ru's physical strength, and the muffled noise continued, but even though Jinbei Fishman's strength was more than 10 times that of a human, he was facing armament at this moment. Sengoku, still not enough. Time has passed, and the Fishmons have collapsed. After all, the Marines present are all elites in the headquarters, and Namur is also not weakly injured, and there are even small holes left by Kizaru's laser in several parts of his body. And Jinbei was also uncomfortable. In the collision with Sengoku, his body continued to suffer injuries. After all, Sengoku the Buddha is the man in marine who is side by side with Garp. It's time to end. At this moment, Sengoku's figure collided quickly, but the same golden light also appeared on Sengoku, shone toward the surroundings, and the golden light passed away. At this time, the figure of Sengoku was even bigger than the giant clan, and the skin of his whole body was covered with gold like steel, like a big Buddha. This is Garp Admiral's Buddha fruit ability. God, the body has become so big, and the strength will also increase terribly. What the hell is this? Marine and the pirates saw the big Buddha. Marine quickly became excited, while the Fishman army was immediately panicked. After all, such a shocking scene would inevitably make people feel terrified. Shockwave. Sengoku, who changed into the form of a big Buddha, seemed to be wearing a layer of air in his right hand, and a powerful impact burst suddenly with the palm of his hand, and no one in the audience was spared. Even Jinbei, that mirror, was bleeding out under this powerful impact and passed out on the ground. After the blow, Sengoku returned to his original state, but there was an inexplicable cold sweat on his forehead. He took a deep breath and said categorically, "Arrest Fishman Jinbei and Fishman Namur and escort them to the warship." Sengoku Admiral, what about Muir? Kizaru looked at Fishman, who was covered in blood. You don't know Whitebeard's temper. He just caused such a big thing in the New World. If you anger him at this time, it will not be worth the harm. Sengoku walked towards Fishman Island with the army. According to the news of Zhang Yang's death, nearly 20 days have passed, and at the same time, it was in the research room of the Holy Land Maria Jo. Dr. Peng Jabek, now it's just a matter of programming to activate consciousness. A researcher in a white coat said solemnly to Peng Jabek next to him. Okay, in an hour, invite Gorosei, 5 elders to the basement and watch the first android test. Peng Jabek said something to the researcher and walked towards an iron door with a combination lock. He entered the password next to him. After the iron door opened, Peng Jabek walked in and saw the surrounding people. A large number of machines and figures lying on an iron chuang. It's a perfect work. I don't know how much strength this first test can show. Walking forward, Peng Jabek looked at the lying figure, full of excitement. He took out a small chip and carefully entered the figure. When the mouth was full of equipment, Peng Jabek walked to the computer that was controlling the machine. The screen shone with green light, and Peng Jabek kept tapping with his fingertips. On the keyboard, shake the joystick from time to time. Various machines were operating one after another, and sparks continued to appear on this figure, until at a certain moment, when a manipulator held a blue crystal, it was embedded in an empty slot in the center of the figure's mouth. Then the manipulator clicked the button next to it, and the crystal in the empty slot was immediately blocked by a spiral object. He manipulated the machine again to debug the figure. When Peng Jabek pressed the red button next to the computer with his big hand, the figure lying on the iron chuang, the originally dark and bottomless eyes turned red at this moment. Mang burst out, and his figure also sat up from the chuang. Come with me, Peng Jabek said in an excited voice, and walked out of the room first, and the figure in the marine costume and the cloak of justice followed behind Peng Jabek step by step. The basement of the World Government Research Institute, which is a collection place for testing weapons developed and other scientific research results. Peng Jabek and Gorosei, 5 elders, looked inside through the transparent windows, standing in the center of the basement. It's basically the same as before, but I don't know how strong it is. The white-bearded Gorosei, 5 elders, said something lightly. That's why I let you guys see the test, so you have a clue. The mysterious issue of Peng Jabek said, there are countless laser light emitters installed on the walls here. Clatter. The button on the side, at this moment, the walls around it are covered with yellow light, and it is shocking like a group of meteors, shooting towards the figure in the middle. Chapter 132 The Black Robe. The 54 Rat Fist of the Tao. All-round laser light with no blind spots burst out from all directions, and when it was about to hit this figure, suddenly, a cold voice without any emotion sounded, and the figure looked calm and pointed forward. Under this finger, the surrounding air began to become hot, and the flames were entwined around the figure, like a whirlwind. No matter how the laser light hit, it was instantly burnt out. Under the heavy explosion, the smoke dissipated, but the figure did not have any injuries, as if the whole body was covered by a layer of rain cover. "Doctor, why can you still use your previous moves?" The Gorosei 5 elders were a little puzzled, since people were already dead, so it wouldn't have happened even if they were reformed. "We used a special instrument to detect that there is a substance similar to Reiatsu in his body, and then violently stimulated his brain cells that had not been developed and had been sleeping, combined with my knowledge of leather notebooks, added to the program chip. There is only the present scene." Quote. Pang Jabik was a little proud, stroking his white beard, and then said, "These are actually coincidences, and I didn't even imagine them, but apart from these, there is another thing that I believe you are very interested in, which is free control. The Conqueror Haki." Quote. The android can also control the Conqueror Haki. Gorosei 5 elders are a little confused, or rather startling, knowing that only 1 in a million people will use Conqueror Haki, but it would be a world-shaking thing for androids. It's the same property as Conqueror Haki, but it increases the pressure on the surrounding environment, thus playing the same role as Conqueror Haki. The intensity of this pressure will continue to increase as it improves. Pang Jabik explained that he pressed another button, and there were countless unknown objects floating in the air, but at the next moment, a strong pressure spread outward from the silhouette, directly smashing them down from midair. So, can it be mass-produced? Gorosei 5 elders are a bit horrified. If it can be batched, then consolidating the status of the world government and fighting against pirates will be a milestone progress. Pang Jabik shook his head with a complicated expression. This technology is still immature, and according to the current situation, his body has just met the conditions. It can be said that the power of this artificial man is based on his special person. And I also equipped him with a knife, operating the most advanced technology that allows objects to have devil fruit powers. No one knows about these things. As time goes by, the Sabayati Bottom Archipelago is also quiet at this moment, and the 3 things that happened before are just topics to pass the time before the tea after dinner. There is a bar on a hill at 13 GR with a sign that is open in front of the door. Shaki's Ripping Off Bar. Inside the bar, a beautiful woman with short black hair was lying on the counter with a cigarette in her mouth and was talking to a white-haired old man sitting opposite her. Rayleigh and Marine have captured the backbone of Fishman, including Princess Otoji, Fishman Tiger, Jinbei, etc. into Impel Down, and now Fishman Island is also deeply invaded by pirates, and it has arrived on the verge of collapse. Quote. Shaki blew a puff of smoke and said slowly to Rayleigh, who was drinking in front of him, "Hachi was also arrested. Aren't you going to do something? These things are for young people. If no one goes, of course I will do it, but since he is here, I still have a drink." Rayleigh stroked the frame of his eyes and said with a smile, "Old man, don't think about being so leisurely. I will definitely pull you when I go." Just as Rayleigh finished speaking, a figure suddenly appeared on the seat next to Rayleigh, but it was said to be a figure, but in fact it wasn't all. It was a figure whose entire body was covered by a black robe. But these are nothing. The most terrifying thing is that his face is full of black mist, and the position of his eyes is even more red, and there are no eyeballs. And this black robe is also very strange. It seems to be natural, or, in other words, it seems to be connected to his body in the first place. Some vague and illusory figures, as well as the gloomy aura emanating, coupled with this terrifying face. At this moment, this figure is like a god of death from hell. Shaki, a bottle of whiskey. A bell rang suddenly in the tavern, and then as the door was pushed open, a rude voice rang in the tavern. After a big man greeted Shaki, he sat directly next to Rayleigh. Why? The big man seemed to be unable to see the black-robed man at all. He walked straight there and sat directly on the bench. The figure passed through the black-robed man, and the two merged together. The big man didn't sit for a while. He took the whiskey handed by Shaki and left the pub while drinking. How's the recovery going these days? Shaki said casually, and the smoke drifted past the figure of the man in black robe. It's not bad. The body has become more and more solidified. I'm afraid it won't take long. Although it is still a spiritual body, it can already be seen by others. A hoarse voice came from the figure in the black robe, and then he sighed and said, however, the strength has not recovered. I am afraid that now it is only Marine who can barely fight the colonel, and this depends on the knife. The loss of strength is so serious. Rayleigh was also stunned for a moment. He didn't pay much attention to the recovery of Zhang Yang's strength. At this moment, his eyes were a little horrified. If you say that, can't you go to Impel down? It should be possible. In half a month, I can recover to about 50–60% of my previous strength. If the situation is good for you, 70% should be about the same. After the man in black robe finished speaking, he said again, Rayleigh, let's go to Fishman Island recently. The situation there is not very good. Hesitating and changing, it is better to go early. Also. Rayleigh nodded solemnly, and then said, then I have recently started looking for a ship to coat. When it's ready, let's go. Okay, then I'll go to recover first, then you can call me. Chapter 133 Re-entering Fishman Island. A medium-sized ship sailed into Fishman Island and docked at the port. After Rayleigh and the man in black disembarked, they were stunned when they saw the surrounding scene. Where's the Dragon Palace guard? The man in black robe let out a light sigh. He remembered that it was in this place, and there should be a guard team that specifically checked into Fishman Island. Go in and have a look. The two walked side by side, but their expressions became more and more solemn along the way. Although nothing could be seen from the mist on the face of the man in black robe, Rayleigh's face was extremely gloomy. Along the way, they found that many buildings on Fishman Island, including the ground, were damaged to varying degrees, and the further they went in, the heavier the smell of blood in the air, as if there had been a heavy battle here. This time, I caught a lot of mermaids, and I can sell it for a good price. And thanks to Whitebeard, if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have the chance to make a fortune. I think, Whitebeard is fast attacking Marineford, and they have cleaned up the various marine branches in the New World. Although it is quiet now, it may be the calm before the storm. At the moment in Gilcrude Plaza, the mermaids gathered in one place, including Fishman, were all bound with hands and feet, and there were guards dead and wounded on the ground on the side, and a large group of pirates looked at these at the moment. The captured Fishman and the mermaid laughed and made noise. Except for the royal family inside the Dragon Palace and those who avoided it, we have had a great harvest this time. Who said it wasn't? If it wasn't for the previous wave of pirates that helped us consume too much of Fishman Island's troops, it would have been a waste of time for us to get in. While the group of pirates were talking, a thin man with a musket suddenly glanced at random, and then his expression suddenly changed, and he spoke in intermittent horror. Captain. Look over there. What? Everyone heard this somewhat panicked cry, and the sound stopped in Cheyenne, and looked over there. At this moment, two figures were walking towards here. Who? Seeing that there were only two of them, the pirate boss didn't care too much. He took a pistol and fired a shot at the sky, shouting loudly, but the next moment, as the black-robed figure raised his head to look at him, the thief boss's expression suddenly changed. He involuntarily stepped back, and there was a touch of fear in his eyes. Are you a human or a ghost? Kill the man in the black robe for me. The pirate boss directly ordered, but seeing no movement from the crowd, he shouted loudly, are you all deaf? Hurry up. The boat. The captain. There is only one old man, not the man in black robe you mentioned. A pirate swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said intermittently to his boss. What? The pirate had opened his eyes wide, a little unbelievable. He looked at the misty face under the black robe next to the old man, and shouted, look, just to the right of the old man, there is a man in a black robe with a black robe on his head. Black fog, scarlet eyes, no smoke. Captain, nothing. The pirates all rubbed their eyes, and when they looked forward, they still found that there was only the old man in front of them, and looked at their heads with some worry. Damn, are you all blind? The pirate head roared loudly, and there was even a cold sweat on his forehead. When a shot was fired, with the sound of pong, the bullet was not hindered by the horrified expression of the pirate head, and it shot directly from the head of the black-robed figure. Passed through. Impossible, impossible. With an almost mad shout, the pirate head fired a few shots at the black-robed man's head, but they passed through without hindrance, and the black-robed figure and the old man continued to walk forward. At that time, the figure of the head of the pirate staggered and threw it directly to the ground. Boss, are you all right? Maybe that's what the pirate boss saw, but in the eyes of other pirates, they all saw their boss as if he was crazy, and kept shooting at the air next to the old man who came over. For a time, the pirate they broke out in cold sweat. Old man, do it, I haven't recovered yet. Suddenly a hoarse voice sounded, and then they saw the old man. Vivi said, that's the only way. Seeing that there was only one person in front of them, but there was a conversation, which shocked them all, and when the cold sweat broke out one after another, they couldn't help but step back. Maybe there was something next to the old man that they couldn't see. Suddenly, the old man's eyes suddenly glared, and an extremely suppressed aura suddenly roamed out from his body. When it swept over them, they all froze in the next instant, rolled their eyes, and passed out on the ground. Bah, King Haki. The pirate's head and eyes suddenly widened, and he was extremely shocked, but under this momentum, he just persisted for a breath longer than the other pirates, and then he also fainted. I told you, this look is too good for a ghost. Rayleigh said with a smile to the man in black next to him. I didn't do this voluntarily. No one is a ghost or a ghost. Who let him see me alone, he deserves it. The man in black robe said, go and untie them quickly. When Rayleigh and the black-robed man came to Shirley, Rayleigh said while unbinding her, Miss Shirley, long time no see. But Shirley didn't answer, but looked at Rayleigh's side and said with an incredible expression, you really are still alive. Miss Shirley, what did you predict? The black-robed man's voice was hoarse. After you saw the news of your death, you immediately performed a divination, and there were two pictures in it, one of you transformed into what you are now, and the other of you fighting with you. Me and me. Hypao and Rayleigh were both stunned. It's wearing a pirate marine costume with a long knife in his hand, exactly the same as you were before. Shirley whispered. It seems that the world government has studied the androids, but they don't know how powerful it is. Do you still need the corpse? I don't need it, but even so, I don't want my dead body to be used as a gunman by the world government. Chapter 134 Tell the Truth. Shirley told them that he was the only one who knew the scene of his divination. Hearing this, Rayleigh and the man in the black robe couldn't help but feel relieved, and then walked towards the Dragon Palace. There was nothing outside the Dragon Palace, but the moment they passed through the corridor and came to the interior of the Dragon Palace, a figure rushed towards Rayleigh and the others, and at the same time, many guards surrounded them. Pluto Rayleigh. This figure is Namur. When he punched him, he was easily blocked by Rayleigh. When he jumped back and landed on the ground, he looked at the black-robed man beside him. Who are you? That Mur. Rayleigh sees this scarred shark fish man is also Isho, apparently having met before. I can't just tell you. When the hoarse voice of the black-robed man came out, he continued, I'm going to see King Neptune. Identify first. Namur clenched his fists tightly, and he was ready to shoot when he saw a disagreement, when the man in black robe said, we have no ill intentions, if you want to kill King Neptune or arrest him, you think we still need to be here with you. Dawdling. Don't worry, Mur. Rayleigh also smiled and continued, and Mur pondered for a while, then did not block their way. Then Mur, you can follow along too. Well, I'm going to let you pass a message to Whitebeard. That Mur was stunned and followed Rayleigh's good black-robed man and walked towards the Dragon Palace Hall. At that time, except for a few people, everyone was very flustered. They clearly saw only one old man, but there were two voices, as if there was one person they couldn't see. Neptune was not arrested by Marine and locked in Impel Down at that time, only Princess Itsuki was arrested. As for the reason, the world government knows that if the two high-ranking people in the royal family are arrested, it will not only give people the conversation fell, and it directly led to the destruction of Fishman Island. Neptune hadn't had a good night's sleep for several days. He understood that although the world government had apparently left a ray of life for Fishman Island, this life was slowly weakened by the constant delay of the world. After all, Fishman the island has no one to protect it, and the backbone of Fishman Island has been captured. The next wave of pirates will come, and everything will be over. If it weren't for that Muir's presence, I'm afraid Fishman Island would have become a living shell, but even so, it wouldn't last too long. Neptune sighed and leaned on the sofa. And at this moment, the door was pushed open. How many pirates? Neptune stood up abruptly in a conditioned response when he heard the door being pushed, and said nervously, but the next moment he was stunned when he saw that Muir, Rayleigh in a black-robed figure, Fluto Rayleigh. I didn't expect King Neptune to remember me, haha. Rayleigh played with the jug in his hand and smiled at Neptune. The one next to you. Neptune's expression was a little dignified, and his sensitive sensory organs made him feel the death energy in this figure. King Neptune, you don't know me anymore. When the hoarse voice came out, Neptune was startled. The man in black robe was silent for a while, and then said, I'm Zhang Yang. What? Zhang Yang? The expressions of Muir and Neptune changed suddenly, and they said incredulously, impossible, aren't you dead? The body has also been divided into two and taken away by the world government. I was framed. Zhang Yang talked about everything from leaving Fishman until the news of his death spread, and then he talked about his resurrection. In the beginning, Zhang Yang was indeed killed by the Gorosei, 5 elders, and the body was taken away. He didn't take any fruit, and the various moves he usually used were all derived from a special thing in Zhang Yang's body called Reiatsu, and we don't have this thing. According to his words, it is his and ours. The body's structure is different. And a few days after his death, there was something that was not weak in the huge pit where the corpse was located on the deserted island, something called aura. Zhang Yang relied on a special method to gather these auras. A spiritual body is the appearance of his face now covered in black robes and formed by black mist. After that, he went to find the Sabayati Bottom Islands, found Rayleigh, and recovered all aspects of his strength. That Muir returned to the Whitebeard pirates. In a room, Vice Admiral told Whitebeard, Vista and Marco about these things. After hearing this, everyone looked a little solemn. These are things they have never been exposed to before. I felt astonished. Then now Fishman Island has officially formed an alliance with Zhang Yang and become his force. Marco's face was no longer lazy, but solemn. Yes, the condition is to rescue Princess Otahime and the backbone of Fishman Island in Impel Down. Muir, who was wrapped in gauze, nodded and continued. Goo-la-la-la, it's getting more and more interesting. Even if he dies once, even if he is resurrected, his strength will be greatly reduced. At this time, it is difficult to break into Impel Down. Even if you add that old man Rayleigh, I am afraid it will save you. If no one is found, on the contrary, he will lose his wife and lose his army. Quote. Whitebeard laughed loudly, but his face became solemn as he spoke. We should be able to let him board our ship at this time. Anyway, I wanted to attack Impel Down. Father, I'm afraid you won't be able to do this. Namur said. At the beginning, Zhang Yang said that he would not join any forces. He would set up a pirate group by himself, and then attack Impel Down. Set up a pirate group. Whitebeard was stunned and said, does he already have a suitable candidate in his heart? After all, Impel Down can be called the strongest prison in the world, and there has been no escape from prison. Probably have Hawkeye, and will go to Sky Island. He said so. Namur said, and he wants me to remind Daddy one thing. What? Pay attention to Marshal Di-Chi, especially to strictly control the devil fruit you get. Chapter 135 Formation of Shichibukai. Zhang Yang and Rayleigh stayed on Fishman Island for half a month. Although several waves of pirates came to Fishman Island, under Rayleigh's men, they could only return without success. During this time, that near led a team of about 100 pirates also came to Fishman Island. After the spread of these pirates who escaped from Fishman Island, Roger's right-hand man of One Piece, king of pirates, Pluto Rayleigh also began to reappear in the eyes of the world. And Rayleigh's announcement that Fishman Island belongs to his own power from now on, once it spreads, it seems to be turned into a cannonball, setting off another stormy sea on the sea, and rumors like ripples continue to sound all over the world. Could it be that Pluto Rayleigh intends to gather his previously scattered accomplices and rise up on Fishman Island? And I heard that Whitebeard sent 8th Division Captain Namur to take the pirates to Fishman Island. Could it be that Rayleigh is going to join forces with Whitebeard? It's hard to say, coupled with the recent major events. First Akainu was executed, and then the publicity matter. Marine's strength has weakened a lot. At this time, if you attack the Marine headquarters, it is indeed an unprecedented good time. During this period of time on Fishman Island, Zhang Yang has been recovering his strength, and now he has about 50–60% of his appearance, and his body is more solid, which can be seen by more people. Although it has only recovered to only about 50–60%, but under the premise that the real strength of the sword is like a fire, it is no longer a big problem to deal with the Marine. It's time to leave. When mentioning the real strength of Lu Jian Ruo Huo, Zhang Yang's eyes flashed a gleam of light. After leaving the cross-legged state, Zhang Yang went to say goodbye one by one, and got on the pirate ship and left Fishman Island alone. As for Rayleigh, Zhang Yang also begged to let him join his pirate group and go to Impel Down together, but was rejected by Rayleigh. Rayleigh said this: "I have passed my youth as a pirate, and I have also been on the Great Route. The point is, I'm old. If I go to Impel Down to save people, I can go with you." Before coming to Zhang Yang, Rayleigh also asked a question that has been haunting his heart. "You have lost your body, and you don't need that corpse. According to what you said, you are a spiritual body gathered from aura. Even if the body is solid, it is only a spiritual body. Does it not have a physical body?" "It's true, but what I've always wanted the most is this state, from a spirit body to a state of true death." Zhang Yang was a little complacent. "I couldn't find a way to truly enter the spirit of death, but this time the Gorosei 5 elders helped me once, and they didn't kill me, but gave me a rebirth from a cocoon. Opportunity to become stronger. Simply put, the biggest role of my spiritual body now is to realize the ability of Logia's elementalization." Because Zhang Yang didn't know navigation knowledge, he asked Namur to find one of the pirates he brought who knew this, and then the two left Fishman Island. Sitting alone on the bow of the boat, blowing the sea breeze, Zhang Yang couldn't help but feel a little melancholy. After one death, he finally understood that Marine was controlled by the world government after all. Even if he sat on the marshal, his actions would probably be controlled by Gorosei 5 elders or limitless. Since justice has a different path, then set up your own pirate group and implement your own justice. The first stop, let's go to Hawkeye. I remember that it was said in the original book that he was at the ruins of a certain country. When Zhang Yang sailed to a deserted island somewhere in the New World, a big event happened in the Marine headquarters. Almost all the Marines gathered in the Marineford Square, with screens, music, red carpets, everything. Today, Marine headquarters will hold a grand ceremony for all-round filming and broadcasting. Kong resigned as Marshal of Marine and transferred to the post of Commander-in-Chief of the World Government. Former Marine Admiral Sengoku the Buddha becomes the new Marine Marshal. Vice Admiral Kizaru, Kuzan, and Admiral Zephyr form Marine 3 Admiral. In addition to the confession of the Marshal and Admiral this time, there is also the Vice Admiral Commodore. The minimum is the appointment ceremony of the Colonel. In short, it is very grand, and Kong, the commander of the world government, solemnly announced something. Honor Marine Major Zhang Yang, reborn under the efforts of Dr. Peng Jabek, the world's first scientist, rejoin Marine and implement absolute justice. As soon as these words were spoken, a figure with a long sword behind his back, wearing a marine costume, and a cloak of justice appeared in front of everyone. Zhang Yang. Tina has now graduated from Marine Academy, because she was awarded the lieutenant junior grade as soon as she got good grades. And most of the people on the 5th floor of the same Marine Academy have graduated, including Smoka, Bastille, Ain and others. Although Smoka did not have the height of publicity after graduation, he was also recognized as a captain. Tina looked at Zhang Yang, who had been transformed. There were water mists in her eyes, and she was about to cry. Bastille on the side said, "Tina, don't be sad, anyway, I can see Zhang Yang." Although it is a very happy thing to be able to see Zhang Yang, they understand that although this android was transformed from Zhang Yang's corpse, it has no feelings, no memory of the past, just a machine, or a killing machine. Thinking of this, everyone was a little depressed again. Also, after discussions between the world government and Marine headquarters, we will form Shichibukai. Kong continued. Shichibukai is the collective name of the 7 great pirates recognized by the world government Marine, and the second largest force in the New World outside of Marine. Only the great pirates with high reputation or combat power that deter pirates are eligible to be elected. Directly under the command of the Gorosei, 5 elders and the commander-in-chief of the world government, Marshal Marine. Not only that, the bounty orders for the 7 big pirates in Shichibukai will be revoked, and they will have freedom and status. However, pirates are pirates. If they don't obey orders or cause serious influence, they will be directly obliterated. We will invite the powerful pirates of the New World. Of course, you can come to the Marine headquarters to recommend yourself. Chapter 136 Hawkeye Mahawk. What happened in Marineford this time, especially the sensation caused by the formation of Shichibukai, was unprecedented, and made the pirates on the sea just about to move. After all, with a legal identity recognized by the world government and Marine, no matter what you do, you will have a layer of protection. This is what most pirates dream of, but when this opportunity came, they were entangled. Not all pirates are called big pirates, and not all big pirates can join Shichibukai, but only 7 pirates. But these are not the most important. Only those who stand on pirate's peak will receive an invitation from the world government. Although they can also recommend themselves, but which pirate's brain is not burned out, he will go to the Marine headquarters. Once he is not selected, come on, it was miserable on the spot. It seems that the 4th emperor was born soon. Looking at the newspaper flying down from the sky in his hand, Zhang Yang leaned against the boat, frowning. Since the time of crossing, history has obviously undergone subtle changes, and the plot of the original is no longer the same. Akainu is dead, so who will replace Admiral? If I recruit Hawkeye Jinbei and the others on board, who will Shichibukai fill in? According to the plot of the original book, when Shichibukai was about to be formed, Zephyr broke an arm, left Marine, and set up another portal. Although there is a kind of fear of the unknown future, it is more of curiosity. A kind of exploration hope gradually rises, and a smile is raised at the corner of his mouth. That's interesting. At a certain moment, when an island with a dense forest and a somewhat gloomy atmosphere appeared in front of Zhang Yang said to the pirate at the helm, "Let's stop. You wait for me on the boat." Zhang Yang said something, and a flash disappeared from the deck and appeared on the island, and then walked to the main island step by step. Walking into the dense and gloomy forest, Zhang Yang's figure became even more bizarre, until at a certain moment, a black shadow flashed past in front of him. Zhang Yang stopped walking, and at this moment, Zhang Yang was behind him again. A dark shadow flashed. Just before Zhang Yang set off, a huge figure jumped from the air and smashed towards Zhang Yang condescendingly, but even if he noticed it, Zhang Yang still did not act. When he let it hit, something weird happened. The huge figure directly penetrated Zhang Yang's body. The punch hit the ground fiercely, countless cracks appeared, and the ground sunk into a big pit. Roar. When a somewhat mad and angry roar sounded, the tree shook slightly, countless leaves fell one after another, and the screams of birds were one after another. This gigantic figure was a boil with black hair all over his body. At this time, there was blood in his eyes. When he missed the shot, he obviously became furious. At this moment, he smashed his fists one after another, but when he landed on Zhang Yang, he directly wore pass-through. The huge boiling was constantly suffocating, and the spirit of unwillingness to admit defeat made it ready to continue punching in the next moment, but at this time, a cold voice that seemed not to be mixed with any emotion suddenly sounded, "Go back." This boiler gave Zhang Yang a vicious look, then ran away from here and hid in the forest. "Who are you?" In front of Zhang Yang was a man wearing a burgundy patterned top, a black vest, and white trousers, especially the pair of eagle-sharp golden pupils was the most shocking. "Is this one of the supreme sharp knives? Hey Dao Yi, I don't know how it compares to Lu Jian Ruo Huo." Zhang Yang didn't answer the man's words, his eyes fixed on the long knife behind him, and after taking a deep look, Zhang Yang retracted his gaze, stared at the man's golden pupil in front of him, and said, "Hawkeye Mahawk, join my pirate team." "Well." Hawkeye Mahawk frowned. "Although I feel that you are not weak, but I am used to being free alone, and I have officially received the invitation of the King Shichibukai, and will not join your pirate group." "Marine is really fast," Zhang Yang murmured, but because his face was still covered in black mist, Hawkeye couldn't see Zhang Yang's expression. He only heard Zhang Yang continue, "You are now the world's greatest swordsman, and you can be compared with you in swordsmanship. Not much, and the most who can surpass you are only 3 people. Hawkeye, if I told you that there is a world of death gods dominated by swords, where you can better hone your swordsmanship, would you be tempted?" Hawkeye frowned. "I don't even know who you are, so how can I prove that you are telling the truth?" As a swordsman, they all want to surpass Hawkeye and become the world's largest swordsman. As the so-called height is too cold, Hawkeye also wants to seek a breakthrough in kendo, but unfortunately, there are not many people who can fight with it. Although the black-robed man in front of him is very polite, but he is sensible and has another world, so go to the ghost. If that's the case, then we will use the rules of the swordsman to decide the outcome. If we lose, you will take my life or let you handle it. If you win, you will join my pirate group." When Zhang Yang's hoarse voice came out, his sleeve robe shook, and a long sword with a hilt of Dongfang Shozi appeared in his right hand formed by the black mist. Zhang Yang raised the flowing blade like fire, and the tip of the sword pointed at Eagle Eye. "Why should I accept your challenge?" Hawkeye glanced at Zhang Yang, and without even pulling out his long sword, he turned around and walked forward. "As of now, you have no choice." Zhang Yang's figure suddenly appeared behind Hawkeye, holding the flowing blade like fire. He slashed down with one knife. The next moment there was a collision sound, and when a spark flashed, Hawkeye had slightly pulled out the black sword knight behind him, blocking Zhang Yang's knife. "Interesting." Hawkeye's eyes tightened, and a sinister smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "It seems that today is not destined to be a boring day." Hawkeye directly pulled out the black knife knight, and when a huge collision erupted again, the two separated as soon as they touched each other, and Hawkeye murmured while looking at each other, "It's very similar to Logia's elementalization. But it's not the same." Quote. Chapter 137 Bankai. "I'd better remind you that if you hide your strength, you will lose." Zhang Yang took a deep look at Hawkeye, his lips murmured, and a voice like a chant came out. "Everything is in the air, all turned into ashes, and the blade is like fire." As the flames wrapped around the flowing blade in an instant, the scorching high temperature instantly distorted the void, and even at this moment, the publicized spiritual pressure was directly upgraded from the deputy captain to the captain level, and it was still rising until it surpassed the captain level. Stopped this time. This is the power of the real Shikai after rubble fire. There was a flash of shock in Zhang Yang's eyes. As the saying goes, if you don't die, there will be blessings. After Zhang Yang experienced a real death and was reborn from the cocoon, he finally got the approval of the sword spirit and truly mastered Shikai, who is like a fire. Hawkeye also noticed this. The knife and even the man in black robe in front of him changed at this moment, stronger than before. Hawkeye with a solemn expression grabbed the knife with his other hand. Handle. Looking at each other, the figures of the two rushed forward, the sound of the flames raging, the sound of swords colliding one after another, and the surrounding trees were roaringly burned in the raging flames. When a crashing sound resounded in the sky, followed by a circle of terrifying air waves centered on Zhang and Mahak, and the two were almost indistinguishable. Blast backwards. But it was also at this moment that the eyes of the two who were retreating were tight, and when the voice suddenly came out, the figures also galloped forward. Black Knife Night Rain. Songming. The dim light in the sky is like a star, and as Hawkeye's black knife slashes forward, the dim light is like a meteor, and it shoots towards Zhang with an amazing momentum. But at the same time, Zhang also slashed forward. When the flames rose violently, it turned into a fire that filled the sky, and when the dim light was wrapped in it, under the constant rotation, a shocking flame tornado was formed in the sky. Boom! Just as a roar erupted from the tornado, the figures of Zhang and Hawkeye also moved. When they collided, the impact of the powerful explosion in the tornado did not separate the two, but moved the surrounding area. The forest within a few feet was razed to the ground. In a single move, the figures of the two kept colliding together, sometimes setting off a terrifying flame, and sometimes a strange dim light overflowed, the air oscillated, the sword energy overflowed, and the ground left shocking cracks and sword marks. Black Night Shining Night. When Hawkeye left a halo of energy on the ground, he jumped up directly. In the crisscross of Zhang body, the figure had already returned to the original place. Even if there was no blood flowing out of Zhang body, his figure was even thinner at this moment. Stand up. You. Hawkeye was about to open his mouth, but the next moment his expression changed. He felt a crack suddenly appear on his chest. When he looked down, there was already a slash on his chest. I'm sorry. When the hoarse voice sounded, the flames that flowed like fire suddenly raged in his hand, and when he waved it, it was like a huge flame palm, suppressing it towards Hawkeye, and immediately shrouded his figure. There is always a mutual resistance. Although my current body is illusory, but the eagle eye can hurt me just now, I am afraid I am wearing a color hockey. Looking at it this way, it's actually quite similar to Logia's elementalization. Except for abilities, there is no transformation or non-transformation of the spiritual body. When this spiritual body becomes thinner and thinner until it dissipates, it is truly dead. Zhang looked at the raging flames burning in front of him, and sat cross-legged on the ground without hesitation. There was a look of enlightenment in his eyes. Although he had guessed before that armament hockey could hurt himself, but now it has been confirmed that he has taken precautions. If you forcibly break through from the inside, you will be chased by intense high-temperature flames. When Zhang hoarse voice passed through the flames and landed in Hawkeye's ears, Zhang murmured while recovering, I don't know how long it will take for Hawkeye to break through this fire and burn the city. Black Saber Shuo. Just when a cold voice that revealed fighting intent sounded, Zhang slightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and he looked at the black shadows that kept appearing in Huofen Chengguo. These shadow areas are expanding very fast, almost a few breaths of time. The dark light and ghost fire directly occupied the ground of Huofencheng, as if forming a domain-like existence, and the monstrous flames were constantly dissipating at this moment, and then where the dim light and ghost fire devoured the general. As Hawkeye's figure gradually appeared in Zhang line of sight, he stood in this area, holding the knife in both hands and slashing forward. A huge sword chi was directly entangled by the dim light and flames, and he was ruthlessly sitting cross-legged. The ground's publicity lure and go. Is this all the strength of Hawkeye? Zhang was a little shocking. Under this sword, he felt extremely terrifying power. Although the flames that flowed like fire were constantly weakening at the moment, the spiritual pressure emanating from Zhang body kept rising. This is a hot hell. The trick is to be used with caution. Since that's the case, I don't know if I have the ability to play Bankai now after being recognized by the sword spirit. Zhang blood-red eyes in the black mist seemed to flash with a gleam of eagerness to try. In a moment, as the spiritual pressure continued to rise, Zhang body became more solid, and the flowing blade was like fire with a heart, and the blade was invisible. Peng Peng jumped up, and the flame was more hidden. Although there is a feeling that Liuran Ruahuo is about to change, but the strange thing is that Liuran Ruahuo still looks like that, and Zhang Yang can't help but be surprised, but at this moment, the huge sword energy of the ghostly fire has come. Zhang Yang in front. Bankai, remnant fire sword east, rising sun blade. At the moment of death, Zhang Yang did not care that the shape of Lu Ren Ruahuo did not change. When the heat of the flame on Lu Ren Ruahuo was all concentrated on the tip of the knife, Zhang Yang raised the knife and pointed forward. When the tip of the knife fell on the huge sword chi that hit, the dim fire on it almost didn't make a sound at this moment, and disappeared directly. Although the sword chi was also a little thinner, it still slashed towards Zhang Yang. Chapter 138 Hawkeye gets on board. After releasing the remnant fire sword east, rising sun blade, which may be Bankai, Zhang Yang's whole person became a little illusory, and Reiatsu suddenly fell, falling to the level of vice captain, even a little bit, and even falling to under the vice captain. Looking at this thin but equally powerful sword chi, Zhang Yang couldn't even do it with Shikai. He held the blade with both hands to block the huge sword. Peng. The condescending blow caused the ground under Zhang Yang to burst suddenly, and it continued to sag into a big pit. At this moment, Zhang Yang was really miserable. Although the huge sword energy has been dissipated at this moment, in order to resist, Zhang Yang has almost no strength to fight, and his body is very weak. Although it is not almost transparent, it is not much better. That move isn't Bankai yet. The nature of Ruo Ren Ruohuo hasn't changed at all. Although it has the appearance of the rising sun blade move, it is not enough, and even less powerful than 30% to 40%. Zhang Yang recalled the previous scene, although regretful, but more shocked. If Liu Ren Ruohuo really reaches the level of Bankai, and evolves into a residual fire sword, the power will not only exert 100%, but only 70% or 80%, you can beat Hawkeye. At least 90% of my strength can be restored before I can go to explore Bankai, which is flamboyant. Otherwise, if I'm not careful, just like the incomplete Bankai before, my life is already hanging by a thread. Zhang Yang sat cross-legged in the sunken ground and recovered for a short period of time, and then disappeared in place in an instant, appeared on the ground, and saw Hawkeye standing with Heidaoye. His face was very pale at this moment. Whoosh whoosh. Zhang Yang's fingertips continued to gather red light, and then he walked towards the eagle eye step by step. Do you want to fight again? Hawkeye saw that Zhang Yang's body became thinner, and then glanced at the dagger in his hand. Dongfang Shozi, and Jintong stared at Zhang Yang's eyes. Who are you? Zhang Yang. When the hoarse voice came out, Hawkeye's pupils shrank suddenly. Is that Major Marine? Aren't you already dead? Yeah, so my current body, don't you see me as illusory? The light gathered by Zhang Yang's fingertips gradually dissipated with the hoarse voice. Can you show me the dagger in your hand? Although Hawkeye was curious about a dead man standing in front of him suddenly, like a ghost, he was just curious, that's all. As a swordsman, what he paid most attention to was the sword. Here. Zhang Yang didn't care either. In his opinion, it was impossible for Hawkeye, the world's largest swordsman, to snatch his sword, and the most important point was that Ruo Ren Ruohuo was his own, and the spirit of the sword was all there. No one can take it away from your body, even if you die. Seeing that Zhang Yang threw the saber over so easily, Hawkeye couldn't help but stun for a moment. After receiving it, he asked suspiciously, aren't you afraid that I will take your saber away? If even Hawkeye, the world's largest swordsman, would do such a thing, then I have to admit it. Zhang Yang shrugged, but he looked a little terrifying now. It was really weird to do such a move, and then he added a sentence. This sword belongs to the world of the god of death. It has two states, Shikai and Bankai. In Shikai, it has almost reached the level of the supreme sword. As for Bankai's great admiral, it surpasses. Hawkeye took a deep look at Zhang Yang. Hearing Zhang Yang's words, there was a shock in his eyes. After withdrawing his gaze, he put Heidoye back behind his back, and then looked solemnly at the sword in his hand with the hilt of Dongfang Shozi. This knife looks very ordinary, and at most it has the appearance of a big fast knife, but when Hawkeye reached out and touched the knife, the figure was shocked. Although the tentacles were cold, an extremely domineering flame was in an instant, the mind of Hawkeye was introduced. What is this knife called? Hawkeye didn't look up, his eyes seemed to be attracted by the knife, and it was difficult to move them away. The strongest ancient Zanpakuto of the flame element, the blade is like fire. When Zhang Yang's words came out, the flowing blade Ruahuo in Hawkeye's hand suddenly dissipated and turned into red light spots like stars. Well, can you really take me to the world of the god of death, you said? A hint of surprise flashed in Hawkeye's eyes. When he stared at this flaming sword, he fell silent. After a while, a very strong light seemed to erupt from his golden eyes and looked at Zhang Yang. Maybe even if he loses the fight, even if he dies, he won't join the flamboyant pirate group, but after seeing the power of this Tachi, he is really eager to move, maybe. A world dominated by swords. Of course. Zhang Yang nodded and said as it should be, but he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Although the captain explained that he had a chance to return to the world of death and avenge him, the most important thing is, how can we get rid of it? The world of pirates crosses into the world of death. So, it is indeed suspected of being a bit eagle-eyed, white wolf with empty gloves. No, it's an empty glove swordsman. By the way, Hawkeye, when did you receive the invitation letter from the King Shichibukai? Hawkeye lived alone, so he didn't have much to worry about. After explaining it to the people, he and Zhang Yang walked towards the island together. On the way, Zhang Yang asked casually. Just a few days after the world government announced the establishment of Shichibukai, the king has actually been thinking about it, but it hasn't gone to sea. Hawkeye also said casually. Now that you have considered it, then you will go to the world government to report that you have agreed to participate in the Shichibukai of the king. Zhang Yang's hoarse voice made Hawkeye's body slam. He didn't know what Zhang Yang meant. Didn't I already join your pirate group? Whoever said join my pirate group can't join the King Shichibukai. Zhang Yang isho, but Hawkeye still doesn't quite understand what he means, looking at Zhang Yang with a puzzled expression. I can't reveal it yet. Your identity as King Shichibukai is also a guarantee for us, and it is much more convenient to do things. Therefore, there are advantages and disadvantages to participating in King Shichibukai. Chapter 139 took Zoro's knife. Hawkeye went to the world government to give a response, and finally officially became King Shichibukai, and then passed through the Holy Land Maria Jo without any obstacles and left the New World. 2 days later, at the entrance of the Great Route, many pirate ships of different flags docked at the port of Logatown. Although there were also several warships, they seemed out of place. At this moment, a medium-sized ship squeezed into the many pirate ships and docked at the port. Why is it said that it is a medium-sized ship and not a pirate group? Because there is no pirate flag. However, it is such an ordinary medium-sized ship, but it makes everyone in the port see what they want, and they are shocked. Even at this moment, there was a moment of silence in the originally noisy and chaotic port, but then, all of them took a breath of cold air, and the shocking sounds continued. Isn't this the world's greatest swordsman? Eagle-eyed Mahawk. How could he be here? As the sword behind it, the legendary Black Sword Knight with only 12 swords. I heard that the Eagle-eyed Mahawk is on the invitation list of the world government's first King Shichibukai. Hawkeye Mahawk was already famous earlier, and when he got off the boat, he caught the attention of everyone present. After all, these characters are not the ones they usually see, or there are only 12 supreme block swords and 12 craftsmen, but it is even more difficult to find. Well, the person next to this. At this time, everyone's eyes slowly moved away from Hawkeye, and they noticed the solid figure wrapped in black robe with head down beside Hawkeye, and they were all stunned. Well, the body is a little illusory. When someone found Zhang Yang, except for a few people who were obsessed with kendo who had been focusing on the big sword behind Eagle Eye, everyone's eyes were fixed on Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang has been thinking about things. At this moment, When he felt that everyone's eyes were on him, he couldn't help but raise his head, but it was fine if he didn't look up. This raised his head surprised everyone. The figure staggered, and could not help but take a few steps back. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, everyone stared at Zhang Yang's face full of black mist in awe. Could it be that the person with the ability to eat some Logia devil fruit is now in an elemental state? I feel like a master who is not easy to mess with, so let's go away. Looking at this black-robed figure with lingering fears, everyone took a few glances, and then what should they do? They all left Zhang Yang here. Why don't we go directly to Sky Island, but come here instead? Do you want to see where my brother Roger was executed? Hawkeye didn't know the purpose of Zhang Yang, and asked suspiciously. Almost, and here, I want to let everyone know about death in another capacity. My knife is not easy to take out, it's too obvious, so the top priority now is to change the knife and confuse their vision. Zhang Yang has been walking with his head down, thus avoiding some trouble. Change knives. Hawkeye glanced, and then he also wanted to understand, but then frowned and said, there is no such thing as a big knife. Who said it must be a big knife? You will know when it arrives. Hearing what Zhang Yang said, Hawkeye didn't ask any more questions. He followed Zhang Yang to the door of a store. Looking at this small and medium weapons store, Hawkeye frowned. He really didn't understand what Zhang Yang was thinking. Welcome, we have a nearly 200-year-old store here. What do you want to buy? A very old man in front of the counter said with a smile. Buy a knife. Zhang Yang said, looking at the white-haired old man for a moment. He remembered that the owner of the shop should be a young middle-aged man, but the next moment he saw the 17 or 18-year-old boy next to him, he suddenly realized that he is still when his father was the shopkeeper. Come on, we're right here. The shop owner said with a smile, but his voice was interrupted by his son. Dad. Dad, look at this. Is this knife? Just. Before the voice fell, the shopkeeper's eyes were horrified, and he ran out directly, looked at He Daoye behind Hawkeye, and swallowed, one of the 12 workers of the Supreme Sword. Black Blade Knight. This, can you, let me, see? The old man's voice was trembling, and he spoke intermittently. Hurry up and see the knife, and we're going to leave when you're good. Hawkeye ignored the old man, but said to Zhang Yang, and at the same time, he walked directly outside the door. Number 1 in the world, it's inevitable that you have some temper. Don't worry about it. Having said that, Zhang Yang walked to the area of 5W Bailey. The world's number 1. The Supreme Sword. Could it be the world's number 1 swordsman Mahawk? After the shock, the father and son were stunned when they saw that Zhang Yang was picking a knife in the area of 5W Bailey. After all, the man who came with him had a sword that was hard to find. But this black-robed people even went to this area to pick, which made them all feel a little weird. This, little brother, this is in the 5W area. Are you going wrong? Although my house is not a famous shop, but I also have a good knife. Let's go quickly, I'll get it for you. While the shopkeeper was talking, he asked his son to go upstairs to get the knife, but was interrupted by a hoarse voice. Okay, this is the knife. Shui Zuo should leave it to Zoro. After all, it's quite embarrassing to take his knife. Seeing Zhang Yang walk out the door, Hawkeye casually flipped the knife in Zhang Yang's hand, but the next moment his eyes were a little surprised. I didn't expect that there would be 3 generations of ghosts here. The 3 generations of Gusha's ancestors and grandchildren, it is already good among the quick knives. Besides, this time I go to impel down to change the knife again. The 2nd generation ghost of Shiryu of the Rain is quite good. Hawkeye and Zhang Yang then walked to the execution stand. At the same time, Zhang Yang's eyes shifted and he walked towards this side, patrolling with Marine, a captain smoking a cigar. Smoka. Chapter 140, Death's Bounty Order. After graduating from Marine College, Smoka was directly awarded the position of captain because of his excellent grades. Because he was a newcomer, he was assigned to Logatown, a town where everything ended and started. Because Logatown is the place where Roger of One Piece, King of Pirates, died, and it has a certain strategic significance in the world, so no matter which island has a problem, Logatown can't have a problem. Here, no one will be stupid enough to have a firefight, affect the order. And Marine also acquiesced to the existence of the Logatown pirates. As long as there is no trouble, they will not be caught, but Smoka thinks that Logatown will be chaotic, so that he can be less idle. Hawkeye Mahawk. Today, Smoka took Marine on another routine patrol, but before the execution stand, Smoka stopped and looked at the figure with a long knife without a sheath. Smoka. Hearing the voice, both Hawkeye and Zhang Yang turned around and saw the man with a cigar in his mouth. Zhang Yang's bloody eyes were a little weird, and it reminded him of the days at Marine Academy. When they turned around, Smoka paid more attention to the man in black robe, especially when he saw the black misty face. Smoka's eyes shrank suddenly, took a deep look at Zhang Yang, and continued patrolling directly with the patrolling Marines. It's almost time for us to go. After Hawkeye finished speaking, he turned around and prepared to leave, but as a sound of breaking the air sounded, his expression wrinkled, and the moment he turned around, he happened to see that the execution table was divided into two, and the upper part was slowly smashing down. At the same time, the 3 generations of ghosts in Zhang Yang's hands have been removed from the scabbard, and the strange flame-like patterns on the knife's body look extremely eerie under the sunlight. Pung! When the other half of the execution table fell to the ground, all the eyes around were attracted, including the Smoka and the others who had not gone far. At this moment, the surroundings were very quiet, until a certain moment, the voice of horror did not come. Sounded. My God, the execution block of One Piece, King of Pirates, was cut open. Does he know what he's doing? Is this contempt for Brother Roger? Who is this black-robed man? The endless voices quickly swept the entire Logatown like a tide at this moment. Eagle Eyes looked at the man next to him, frowned, and said, "What on earth are you trying to do? Why don't you do it?" Zhang Yang shrugged, and when the hoarse voice came out, he saw Smoka run over. Watching, Zhang Yang exhaled a puff of smoke, and said, "I'm Captain Smoka of Marine who is in charge of Logatown. Come with me for a while." "Come on, take it." When the voice fell, the Marines behind him walked towards Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang didn't resist at all, but when Marine grabbed Zhang Yang's hands and was about to put the shackles, he passed through them strangely. Is it a natural fruit person? Smoka's face was gloomy. If you don't act obediently, don't blame me. Smoka took out the 10 hands made by Seastone and smashed it towards Zhang Yang, but the next moment he was blocked by Zhang Yang's easy knife. Captain Smoka, don't be so impulsive, you are not my opponent. As he said that, Zhang Yang's left hand punched Smoka directly in the stomach. The powerful impact caused some blood to overflow from the corner of his mouth, and the figure flew out directly, but it still landed smoothly on the ground. Is it armament hockey? Smoka spat out a mouthful of blood, his figure turned into a white mist, and he rushed towards Zhang Yang with his crossed white hands. When they arrived in front of Zhang Yang, 10 hands kept smashing towards Zhang Yang, and at the same time the Marines raised their long guns, and the bullets shot towards Zhang Yang. But strangely, the bullet passed through Zhang Yang's body without any hindrance, and there was no trace of it, and the figure in the fight between Zhang Yang and Smoka was not affected by the passing of the bullet. Okay, stop playing, Eagle Eye, let's go. At the same time, the students of the same class, Zhang Yang is not good at hitting Smoka too hard. When Smoka smashed again with 10 hands, Zhang Yang appeared behind him in a blink of an eye, and smashed Smoka with a knife first, which directly made Desmoka unconscious and fainted to the ground. You, who are you? Looking at Smoka who fainted on the ground, a Marine held a spear and looked at Zhang Yang with a trembling figure. Death. A figure in black robes who followed Hawkeye and claimed to be the god of death slashed the execution platform in Logatown with one knife. The news was spread by 10, and it was spread by 10. Although it was not a big deal, it also spread the name of the god of death in the sea, and in the end, even the Marine headquarters was alarmed. Considering the peculiarity of the matter, Captain Smoka was knocked out after all, and Marine's headquarters started a bounty for the black-robed man who claimed to be the god of death. Grim Reaper, the bounty is 5 million Baileys. Young Master is also someone who has a bounty. When he knew that his bounty was only 5 million Baileys, Zhang Yang was a little embarrassed and a little excited. After all, the bounty of 5 million Baileys was too small, and if he hadn't stunned Smoka, the bounty would still be worth it. Can be reduced by half. However, Zhang Yang didn't care too much. His goal has been achieved. In the newspapers, the events he caused have already been placed in the headlines. Do you know how to get to Sky Island? It has been a few days since they left Logatown. Zhang Yang and the others are sitting on a medium-sized boat and are sailing on the boundless sea. Sitting on the deck, Hawkeye is curiously asking Zhang Yang, but the words just fell. The pirate at the helm, a panicked voice came out suddenly. Not good, look at the airflow in the middle of the sea. A whirlpool in the middle of the sea is flowing at an extreme speed, but Zhang Yang is very happy to see this scene. Come closer, or there will be no chance. Boss, this. Hurry up. This pirate is very puzzled. Is it still looking for a chance to die in a hurry? But Zhang Yang had already said so he had no choice but to lift a heart, steer the helm nervously, and let the boat slowly approach the whirlpool. Little by little, the boat came to the center of the vortex, but at this moment, a mutation protruded, and a water column suddenly spewed up, causing the boat to continue to float up. With Zhang Yang, the ship exploded.